A Severity 0 alert flashed on the security team's screen. New device registered. Two-factor authentication requested. User, legitimate FireEye employee. Device, unknown.
The employee was contacted immediately. Did you register a new phone?
Yo. That single word triggered the most consequential cybersecurity investigation in American history. Because in that moment, FireEye, one of the world's premier cybersecurity firms, the company that hunts nation-state hackers for a living, the organization that had exposed Russian attacks on the DNC and Chinese espionage campaigns, realized they'd been breached.
But not by ordinary criminals, not by ransomware gangs looking for Bitcoin. This was something else, something professional, something that smelled like foreign intelligence.
Within days, FireEye CEO Kevin Mandia would make a rare trip to Fort Meade, Maryland, home of the National Security Agency, to brief America's most secretive intelligence agency on what his team had discovered. Within weeks, the world would learn that Russian intelligence hackers had penetrated the US Treasury, the Department of Commerce, the State Department, the Pentagon, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Institutes of Health, and thousands of private companies, all through a single software update.
December 13th, 2020. The disclosure that changed everything.
FireEye announced they'd discovered a sophisticated supply chain attack. Russian hackers, later identified as APT-29, also known as Cozy Bear, also known as Russia's SVR Foreign Intelligence Service, had compromised SolarWinds, a Texas-based software company whose Orion network management platform was used by 33,000 organizations worldwide. The hackers had injected malware, dubbed SUNBURST, into legitimate Orion software updates. When IT departments across America installed what they thought were routine security patches, they were actually installing backdoors that gave Russian spies access to their most sensitive networks. Approximately 18,000 government agencies and companies downloaded the poisoned update. Of those, Russia's hackers manually selected roughly 100 high-value targets for further exploitation. They'd been inside American networks since March 2020. 9 months of undetected access, reading emails, stealing data, mapping infrastructure, preparing for who knows what. This was not a drive-by shooting on the information highway, Kevin Mandia told CBS News. This was a sniper round from somebody a mile away from your house. This was special operations. This is the story of the most sophisticated cyber attack in history. A hack so stealthy that even FireEye, whose entire business is detecting nation-state intrusions, almost missed it. A supply chain compromise so elegant that America's top cybersecurity experts called the tradecraft phenomenal. This is espionage in the 21st century, where lines of code are more valuable than satellite photos, where software updates become weapons, where the battlefield is invisible, but the stakes are existential. This is Russia versus America, SVR versus NSA, Cozy Bear versus the most powerful nation on Earth. And for 9 months, Russia was winning. Welcome to SolarWinds, the hack that breached America. The operation that proved no network, no matter how secure, how monitored, how defended, is truly safe. APT-29 doesn't exist, at least not officially.
There's no building with their name on it, no website, no press releases. The hackers who compose this elite unit of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, don't acknowledge what they do. They don't leave calling cards. They don't brag on forums.
They are ghosts in the machine, shadows in the network. The best of the best at what intelligence agencies call signals intelligence collection, stealing secrets through cyberspace.
Western cybersecurity firms have given them many names: Cozy Bear, The Dukes, Nobelium, UNC 2452, Dark Halo, Midnight Blizzard. Each name represents a different researcher's attempt to track the same elusive adversary.
But AP29, Advanced Persistent Threat 29, is the designation that stuck. And advanced doesn't begin to describe them. Unlike most hacking groups, APT-29 plays the long game. Where ransomware gangs smash and grab in days, APT-29 will spend years inside a target network, quietly, methodically, building understanding of systems before extracting data.
Their targets tell you everything about Russian intelligence priorities: foreign ministries across Europe, defense contractors, think tanks focused on Russia policy, pharmaceutical companies, energy infrastructure, and repeatedly, obsessively, US government networks.
In 2015, APT-29 breached the State Department. They stayed for months, reading diplomatic cables, understanding US foreign policy from the inside.
In 2016, they hit the Democratic National Committee. That operation, running parallel to a more aggressive hack by GRU military intelligence, APT-28, Fancy Bear, showed APT-29's trademark restraint. While GRU hackers dumped stolen emails publicly through WikiLeaks, APT-29 quietly stole and analyzed without making noise. In July 2020, during the height of COVID-19, APT-29 targeted vaccine research in the US, UK, and Canada, stealing intellectual property, understanding the science, possibly trying to gain leverage or accelerate Russia's own vaccine development.
And throughout, they evolved, constantly. Each campaign used different tools, different infrastructure, different malware, making attribution difficult, making defense nearly impossible.
Security researcher Matthew Pfau from ESET described APT-29 as far from monolithic. The group appeared to be composed of multiple sub-teams with different objectives and tools. Sometimes they'd share implants, sometimes operate independently, all reporting to Russia's SVR.
APT-29's malware has legendary names in cybersecurity circles.
Mini Duke 2008. Early malware written in assembly language. Rare, sophisticated, efficient.
Cozy Duke, Cosmic Duke, Onion Duke 2013-2014, evolutions adding C++ components and anti-analysis features. Hammer Toss 2015. Malware that used Twitter handles and GitHub to send commands, hiding in plain sight on public platforms.
Wellmess 2018, used against Japanese firms and later in COVID vaccine attacks.
And in 2020, SUNBURST, the crown jewel, the masterpiece, the operation that would expose thousands of networks and force a global reckoning with supply chain security. In 2014, Dutch intelligence, AIVD, managed something extraordinary. They hacked the hackers. AIVD compromised security cameras in an SVR building. They watched APT-29 operators come and go, identified faces, linked them definitively to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. When AIVD shared this with the NSA and other Five Eyes partners, it confirmed what everyone suspected. APT-29 was state-sponsored at the highest levels. This wasn't freelance hackers working for hire. This was Russia's premier foreign intelligence agency conducting cyber espionage operations. The SVR, successor to the KGB's first chief directorate, operates with patience and professionalism that reflects decades of tradecraft. They understand operational security. They understand compartmentalization. They understand how to run multi-year operations without getting burned. And in 2019, they began planning their most audacious operation yet. Because AP29 had realized something about modern cybersecurity. You don't have to hack every target individually. You just have to hack the software they all trust.
SolarWinds looked like any other software company in Austin's booming tech scene. Offices near the airport, about 3,000 employees, respectable revenue, nothing flashy.
But what SolarWinds sold was everywhere.
Their flagship product, Orion, was network management software used by IT departments to monitor their infrastructure. Servers, routers, databases, applications, Orion watched it all, sending alerts when things went wrong, providing dashboards showing system health.
33,000 organizations used Orion, including the Pentagon, the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, the Treasury Department, NASA, the NSA, yes, even the NSA,
most of the Fortune 500,
Major telecommunications companies.
critical infrastructure operators.
When you installed Orion, you gave it privileged access to your network. It needed that access to monitor everything. It was trusted software from a trusted vendor. And that trust made it the perfect target. Exactly how Russian hackers first breached SolarWinds remains murky. The company has never fully disclosed the initial intrusion vector.
Possibilities include
Credential theft, phishing, password spraying,
exploitation of a vulnerability in SolarWinds' own systems, compromise of a third-party vendor SolarWinds used.
social engineering against employees.
What's certain, by September 2019, APT-29 was inside SolarWinds' network, not just on the corporate side, inside the software development environment. The hackers didn't rush. That's not how APT-29 works.
Instead, they spent weeks studying SolarWinds' build process, how Orion's software updates were created, tested, signed, and distributed to customers.
In October 2019, they inserted a small piece of innocuous test code into an Orion build. They watched to see if it would be caught by code reviews, security scans, or any quality assurance processes.
It wasn't. The code made it through, was compiled, was digitally signed with SolarWinds' legitimate certificate, was distributed to customers.
This told the Russian hackers everything they needed to know. They could modify Orion updates, and customers would install whatever they sent. No questions asked. Perfect trust. Between late February and early March 2020, just as COVID-19 was becoming a global pandemic and everyone's attention was elsewhere, the Russians returned to SolarWinds with the real payload.
They injected approximately 4,000 lines of malicious code into Orion's source code. The malware was sophisticated beyond anything cybersecurity researchers had seen.
SUNBURST, the backdoor.
Masqueraded as part of Orion's legitimate SolarWinds.OrionCore.BusinessLayer.dll file.
Lay dormant for 12-14 days after installation, avoiding immediate detection.
Communicated with command and control servers disguised as Orion traffic.
Could read files, execute commands, reboot machines, steal credentials.
Disabled security tools and event logging. Was digitally signed, so security software trusted it.
The tradecraft was exquisite. Researchers who later reverse engineered SUNBURST used words like elegant, innovative, and phenomenal to describe it.
SolarWinds released the compromised Orion updates through their normal software distribution process.
Version 2019.4 HF5, released March 2020.
Version 2020.2, released March 2020.
Version 2020.2 HF1, released May-June 2020. Approximately 18,000 SolarWinds customers downloaded these updates. Organizations that believed they were patching security vulnerabilities were actually installing Russian spyware.
IT departments installed the updates. Orion quietly upgraded. SUNBURST activated. The backdoor opened.
And Russian intelligence hackers had access to
Federal agencies managing America's nuclear weapons.
Departments overseeing economic policy.
Telecommunications providers.
Defense contractors.
cybersecurity firms. Oh, the irony.
Major tech companies. But here's the restraint that shows AP29's professionalism. They didn't exploit all 18,000 infections. That would have been too noisy, too visible. Instead, they manually selected roughly 100 high-value targets, maybe fewer, and focused their efforts there.
The rest left alone. Backdoors installed but not activated. Insurance policies. Options for future use.
For the next 9 months, Russia's SVR read American secrets, and nobody knew.
Charles Carmichael, FireEye's senior vice president and CTO, stared at the alert. Something was wrong. A FireEye employee's account had enrolled a new device for multi-factor authentication, standard procedure when someone gets a new phone. Except the employee said he didn't get a new phone.
Which meant someone else had his credentials.
someone who'd bypassed the first layer of authentication and was now trying to register their own device to bypass the second.
FireEye escalated immediately. This wasn't normal criminal activity. This had operational security, discipline, professional tradecraft.
Kevin Mandia, FireEye CEO, got the briefing. His gut reaction, based on 25 years responding to nation-state incidents: this is Russia.
The investigation moved into high gear.
FireEye's incident response team, some of the best digital forensic investigators on Earth, began tearing apart their own network.
They examined pocket captures, reviewed endpoint logs, analyzed authentication patterns, searched for indicators of compromise. And they kept finding the same thing. The earliest evidence of intrusion led back to one system, a system running SolarWinds Orion.
But that system appeared clean. No malware, no obvious signs of compromise. Just, that's where the trail started. It didn't make sense.
Unless...
What if the problem isn't on our system? Someone suggested. What if it's in the SolarWinds software itself?
They pulled the Orion installation files, the updates, the DLL libraries, began reverse engineering the code.
And found 4,000 lines that shouldn't have been there.
SUNBURST, hiding in plain sight. Digitally signed, trusted, malicious.
The implications hit like a freight train.
If FireEye, a cybersecurity company that specializes in detecting nation-state attacks, had installed compromised SolarWinds updates, then everyone who used SolarWinds was potentially compromised.
This wasn't a targeted attack on FireEye. This was a supply chain attack affecting thousands of organizations.
The Pentagon, the White House, the nuclear weapons complex, America's Fortune 500.
All potentially breached. All potentially being spied on by Russian intelligence. Right now, at this moment. Mandia made the call to Fort Meade, briefed the NSA. Within hours, the US government's cyber defense apparatus was mobilizing.
FireEye announced they'd been breached. Red team tools had been stolen. They were working with law enforcement.
The announcement mentioned it was a sophisticated nation-state actor. Most of the cybersecurity world assumed it was China or Russia going after FireEye's intellectual property.
Nobody yet understood the true scope. FireEye published a detailed technical analysis. Highly evasive attacker leverages SolarWinds supply chain to compromise multiple global victims with SUNBURST backdoor. SolarWinds confirmed the breach, admitted that malicious code had been inserted into Orion updates distributed between March and June 2020. Reported that the Treasury Department and Commerce Department had been breached.
The Washington Post quoted anonymous sources. This is a much bigger story than one single agency. This is a huge cyber espionage campaign targeting the US government and its interests.
Within 24 hours, the cybersecurity world was in chaos. Companies scrambling to check if they'd installed the compromised updates, government agencies shutting down Orion systems, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, issuing emergency directives.
And investigators beginning to understand that this was the most successful Russian cyber espionage operation against the United States ever documented.
But the real question everyone wanted answered: what did they steal? And what are they planning to do with it?
The scope kept growing.
Treasury, breached. Commerce, breached. State Department, breached.
Energy Department, which oversees nuclear weapons, breached.
Homeland Security, breached. Justice Department, breached.
Unknown, but suspected.
The NSA, America's most secretive intelligence agency, tasked with protecting classified networks, launched an urgent hunt through their own systems. Had SUNBURST infected even them?
Microsoft announced their security researchers had detected SUNBURST binaries in Microsoft's own environment. The hackers had gone after Microsoft, possibly trying to access source code, possibly seeking intelligence on security vulnerabilities, possibly just seeing how far they could reach.
The full damage assessment would take years. Maybe it would never be fully known.
December 13th, 2020. CISA issued Emergency Directive 21-01, the most serious cybersecurity directive ever issued by the US government.
All federal agencies were ordered to
immediately disconnect or power down all SolarWinds Orion products.
2. Review network traffic logs for indicators of compromise. 3. Report any evidence of intrusion to CISA and the FBI.
The problem: disconnecting Orion meant federal agencies lost visibility into their own networks. Orion was their monitoring tool. Shutting it down left them partially blind.
But leaving it running meant Russian hackers potentially still had access. It was an impossible choice. They chose blindness over continued breach. The National Security Council activated Presidential Policy Directive 41, Obama-era emergency protocols for significant cyber incidents.
The Cyber Response Group convened. Representatives from
Department of Defense,
NSA Cyber Command,
FBI,
Department of Homeland Security,
CIA,
Treasury,
State Department.
Their mission: understand the scope, coordinate response, prepare retaliatory options.
Publicly, US officials were initially cautious about attribution. Cyber attribution is hard. Attackers use false flags. Infrastructure gets rented through cutouts. Definitive proof takes time.
But privately, intelligence agencies were confident. This was Russia, specifically APT-29, specifically the SVR.
The technical indicators matched previous AP-29 operations. The targets aligned with Russian intelligence priorities. The patience and operational security were SVR trademarks. On December 23, 2020, Kevin Mandia stated publicly, Russia was very consistent with the attack profile, most likely the SVR.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told a radio interviewer it was pretty clearly Russia.
The Kremlin denied everything. Standard playbook. The US and UK governments issued formal joint statements attributing the SolarWinds compromise to Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR. The statements cited APT-29, Cozy Bear, and the Dukes, all names for the same SVR hacking unit. President Biden imposed sanctions on Russia, expelled diplomats, implemented restrictions on Russian sovereign debt. The sanctions were largely symbolic. Russia's response? More denials. No admission, no apology. Because in the world of cyber espionage, getting caught doesn't mean admitting guilt. It just means being more careful next time.
U.S. government assessments concluded.
Approximately 18,000 organizations downloaded the compromised Orion updates. Roughly 100 organizations, maybe fewer, were specifically targeted for follow-on exploitation.
9 federal agencies confirmed breaches.
Dozens of Fortune 500 companies confirmed compromises.
The operation ran undetected for approximately 9 months. What was stolen?
Emails, thousands upon thousands of emails.
Source code from Microsoft and possibly others.
Intellectual property.
Policy documents.
Strategic planning materials.
Who knows what else?
The intelligence value was incalculable. Russia's SVR now understood American government decision-making at a granular level. They'd read communications about Russia policy, China strategy, Iran negotiations, trade agreements, defense planning. They'd seen how America's government agencies actually work. Not the public facade, but the messy reality of bureaucratic infighting, policy debates, and strategic disagreements. For foreign intelligence, this was a treasure trove. And the scariest part? We might never know everything they got, or what they're planning to do with it. SolarWinds CEO Sudhakar Ramakrishna, who'd been hired after the breach to clean up the mess, sat before the Senate Intelligence Committee trying to explain how his company had been turned into a weapon against the United States. Senators were furious, bipartisan fury. How could a company that provides software to the most sensitive parts of our government have such inadequate security? Senator Mark Warner demanded. Ramakrishna's answers were unsatisfying because the truth was unsatisfying. SolarWinds had been running a typical software company security posture. Good enough for most threats,
but woefully inadequate against APT-29's capabilities.
Microsoft President Brad Smith testified that the SolarWinds attack was the largest and most sophisticated attack the world has ever seen. FireEye's Kevin Mandia described it as special operations that required special operations to detect. This wasn't ordinary. This was nation-state cyber warfare at the highest level.
As researchers dug deeper into SUNBURST, they found additional layers.
A second-stage malware deployed to high-value targets after SUNBURST established access. Even more sophisticated, even harder to detect. Another loader delivering payloads to specific victims. Part of APT-29's toolkit for maintaining persistent access. Later discovered to be the malware APT-29 used to inject SUNBURST into SolarWinds' build environment. It monitored the build process, waited for the right moment, then inserted the malicious code.
The operation had multiple layers, multiple implants, multiple redundancies. If defenders found one piece, the Russians had backups.
CrowdStrike researchers noted that APT-29 often deployed multiple implants on the same machine. If defenders discovered and removed one, the Russians simply used another that defenders hadn't found yet.
This was chess played at grandmaster level, and most organizations weren't even playing checkers.
SolarWinds exposed a vulnerability that should have been obvious but wasn't. Every organization's security is only as strong as their weakest vendor. You can have the best firewalls, the best intrusion detection, the best training, but if you trust a software vendor's updates, and you have to trust them because you can't verify every line of code in every update, then that vendor becomes a backdoor into your network.
And vendors themselves became targets, not just SolarWinds. The entire concept of trusted software distribution was now suspect.
Post-SolarWinds, organizations began
Implementing zero-trust architectures. Verify everything, trust nothing.
Segregating vendor access more strictly.
monitoring software updates for anomalies, demanding software bills of materials, SBOMs,
Requiring vendors to demonstrate security practices.
But these measures take years to implement, and sophisticated attackers like APT-29 adopt.
In October 2021, Microsoft revealed that APT-29 had continued operations after SolarWinds exposure. They'd shifted tactics. Instead of supply chain attacks, they were password spraying against cloud services, exploiting vulnerabilities in VPNs and remote access tools, targeting cloud service resellers, attacking MSPs to reach their customers, phishing using fake Microsoft Teams messages. Microsoft's Threat Intelligence Center warned that APT-29 had targeted 140+ cloud service resellers and technology suppliers since May 2021, successfully compromising 14. SolarWinds hadn't stopped AP29. It had just taught them to vary their methods.
February 2024, joint advisory from NSA, FBI, and allied agencies warned that APT-29 had adopted tactics for initial cloud access.
They were now exploiting authentication weaknesses in cloud environments, targeting service provider credentials, moving laterally through cloud infrastructures, stealing data from Microsoft 365 and Azure environments. AP29 hadn't gone away. They'd evolved, learned, adapted. Because for Russia's SVR, cyber espionage isn't a campaign, it's a permanent mission. Financial. Estimates of the total cost to government, companies, remediation efforts range from $50 million to $100 billion. Nobody really knows. Strategic. America's adversaries learned that even the most secure US government networks could be penetrated. China, North Korea, Iran, all watching, all taking notes. Trust. Confidence in software supply chains, in vendor security, in digital infrastructure, shattered. The rebuild will take years. Policy, the Biden administration requested $750 million specifically for SolarWinds recovery. The investment in cybersecurity infrastructure increased dramatically. But the biggest cost might be the intelligence value Russia gained, and we'll never fully quantify that.
Ann Neuberger, Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber, briefs the president on the latest threat assessment. APT-29 remains one of the most active and capable nation-state threats. Their methods evolve constantly.
Somewhere in Russia, the same SVR operators who pulled off SolarWinds are planning the next operation. Different target, different vector, same patience, same professionalism. Because SolarWinds taught them something important. Supply chain attacks work, and the window between discovery and public disclosure gives them months of undetected access.
In Austin, Texas, SolarWinds still operates. New leadership, improved security, but the company will forever be associated with one of history's worst cyber breaches.
Kevin Mandia, who discovered the attack, has since stepped down as CEO of FireEye, now Mandiant, now part of Google. But he remains a voice warning about the evolution of cyber threats.
And in Fort Meade, Maryland, the NSA's Threat Operations Center monitors for the next SUNBURST, the next elegant, sophisticated, impossible to detect supply chain compromise.
What did Russia steal that we haven't discovered yet? How many other vendors have been compromised but not caught? Is there currently another SUNBURST-level breach happening right now that hasn't been detected?
Unknown. Possibly many. Almost certainly yes. Because here's what SolarWinds proved.
Modern cyber defense is nearly impossible. The complexity of software supply chains creates unlimited attack surface. Every vendor is a potential entry point. Every update is a potential weapon.
Nation-states with resources like Russia's SVR can play the long game. They can spend years researching targets. They can deploy patient, sophisticated operations that evade even the best detection. And perhaps most terrifying, even when caught, they face minimal consequences. Sanctions, diplomatic expulsions, strongly worded statements. Then they go back to work. APT-29 is still out there, still hunting, still patient.
The next SolarWinds is coming. Different company, different technique, same result.
We just don't know where or when. SolarWinds accelerated the cyber arms race between superpowers.
China watched and learned. Their supply chain compromises grew more sophisticated.
North Korea adopted the playbook for cryptocurrency theft and espionage.
Iran studied the techniques for operations against Middle Eastern targets and US infrastructure.
Every major nation is now investing billions in both offensive cyber capabilities and defensive infrastructure. The battlefield is expanding, the weapons are evolving. And the scariest part? We can't see it, can't touch it, can't know when we're losing until it's already over.
In June 2021, Kevin Mandia received a mysterious postcard, no return address, postmarked from a location consistent with Russia.
The message questioned FireEye's attribution of the SolarWinds attack to Russia. Was it intimidation? Mockery? Psychological operations?
Mandia couldn't say for sure. That's the challenge of cyberspace: plausible deniability, anonymous threats, uncertainty.
But he knew one thing: the Russians were watching. Still engaged, still operating.
What I learned from the SolarWinds implant, Mandia said, is that software and security companies are absolutely fair game for espionage. If they can breach FireEye, the hunters themselves, they can breach anyone. That's the lesson of SolarWinds. Nobody is safe. Everyone is a target. And the next breach is already in progress.
If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to get notified when we post new content.